What's up, parish orphans and retrogrades? I come to you today with Mr. Trent Horn to discuss abortion, Roe versus Wade, today's groundbreaking case, ostensibly, Fulton, and what we can expect from SCOTUS on the upcoming religious liberty and abortion cases. We're also going to get into some of the meat of the substance of those decisions, which is really abortion apologetics. So no one better to do that than Mr. Trent Horn. How the heck are you, man?
I'm doing well, sir. I'm another California expatriate like you. I'm loving Texas. It's a great place.
Yeah. So when did you move? Like a month and a half ago?
It's been a while, actually. So we bought a house in October and we moved in December.
I thought so. When did Catholic Answers move the whole shop there? I thought it was more recently. Maybe I'm just
No, well, I mean, there's still talk about that. It's kind of in limbo. We're not sure what'll go down with that, but I made it clear to them that I don't want to stay in California. I had enough. Enough was enough, and I'm glad I got here when I did, because I got here while all the COVID stuff was
right.
still in pretty full swing. So like there wasn't a lot of people weren't buying houses, for example. So when we bought, way back in October, but now I'm glad I'm not trying to buy a house now. It's like things worked out well.
I was just saying this. So you bought that house only 3 months after I bought this house in Mississippi.
Yeah.
And we got in at the right time, my friend, because I have friends that are trying to buy houses now. I can't even imagine in Dallas where it's really hot.
Yeah.
And they're suffering.
It's hard. So no, but I love it here. It works out well. I live in Keller, which is a suburb of Fort Worth.
Yep.
And so I would never live in Dallas. Dallas and Fort Worth kind of hate each other, actually. It's kind of a little rivalry, but I love Tarrant County, Fort Worth. It's just a great place to raise kids, and it's still a big city. I do a lot of travel, so flying in at a DFW is super accessible. But yeah, it's just it's great here, and I'm happy to do that, and still doing everything with Catholic Answers, growing my podcast, and doing a lot more rebuttals and things like that. So things are good.
Keller, I have a dear friend in Keller, the bassist in my band in college, and he actually owns a dojo just outside Keller. So he's a sensei or what have you. So if you ever want to train, you can go to.
What's the style?
It's MMA, but with an emphasis on BJJ. My friend Blas Carrasco, and his last name means executioner. So he's nice. He's extra tough. He could be your Mr. Miyagi.
I would be glad. I've looked at different fighting styles. The one that intrigues me the most that I would love to learn is Krav Maga. That's the fighting style of the Israeli defense force, because I like that it's just like it's practical. It's like, this is what you do if you're ambushed by 3 people and how to get out of there and not get your butt handed to you.
Right, you rip out a guy's eyeball. That's Krav Maga.
The rule is there's no rules, man.
Yeah. It's like, hey, how to fight a man's 2 eyeballs with your bare hands. That's
basically.
No, it's they don't mess around.
No,
cool. Well, so yeah, you're there in DFW, and for some reason I thought the rest of Catholic Answers are they still in El Cajon, the box?
Yeah, they're still in the box. They're still in El Cajon. I was just out there filming recently. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see. Hopefully, we just hired Joe Heschmeyer. Well, I think he came on your show recently.
He's going to come back on the show soon.
Yeah. So he's working remote. So I think we're expanding that a little for people.
That's cool. I mean, now that everyone knows that it can be done, you can't unring the bell, employers.
Right. Yeah.
So, well, great, man. So look, we've been meaning to have another talk. I was asking you to do a pro Crusades, pro Galileo, pro Inquisition show, and you suggested some guys, and you're like, but why don't we talk abortion? It's a really hot deal right now because the court is going wacky with all of these unanimous SCOTUS decisions, really unheard of. There seems to be some political language behind it. Many have, I think, very sanely suggested that this is a message, shot being fired across the bow to the Biden saber rattling with regard to court packing. Well, don't do it.
The idea of court packing, I mean, if conservatives were promoting this idea, all of the media would say that they were fascists bent on taking over all three branches of government. And it's just absurd that it's just proposed. Well, it's not, we don't like how it is, so we're just going to try to change everything. I don't think it's going to. I mean, FDR tried to do it, and he had way better support in Congress and couldn't get it done. But it is a ridiculous thing to try to say, well, we want to turn the judiciary into the legislature. Why not?
And it's already there. The judiciary already is the super legislature with the power of essentially unchecked legislating from the bench. And remember, like when FDR did this, and not you, Trent, but people out there, he was shut down. He didn't end up needing to pack the court, but this is when he turned the entire jurisprudential table around. This is when he started. We didn't get Wickard v. Filburn. We didn't get any of the really, really aggressive socialist jurisprudence out of the Korematsu. Liberals will never talk about Korematsu in 1943 when the court said it was okay to intern American Japanese, all because FDR was a tyrant. He threatened court packing. They were shutting down the New Deal until he threatened it. And then he didn't end up packing the courts, but he got what he wanted. I don't know how much integrity there exists on most of these justices on SCOTUS, but just this morning, we had a religious liberty case, a pro-Catholic religious liberty case regarding homosexual adoption, come out unanimously in favor of the plaintiff and the petitioner, who was a Catholic, in a case called Fulton. So by my count, this is 4 unanimous decisions. The court definitely seems to be sending some message.
Oh yeah, well, even the liberal justices have remarked publicly that they don't believe in court packing, because I mean, you always have to take a principle. Would you be okay with this principle if your ideological opponent wielded it? I mean, that's always a fair thing that people should ask themselves. I'm surprised though at 9-0 on that, because I remember other cases. I remember I think it was 2018, there was a case, Nifla versus Becerra. So this was when Becerra, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, he was California Attorney General. Now he's in the Biden cabinet, I think. So he's like Health and Human Services, or he's up there now. But California said, look, if you're a pregnancy center, you have to have a sign telling women where they can go get abortions. It's just like you have to advertise abortion services. And it went to the Supreme Court, and it was 5-4 in favor of the pregnancy centers. So 4 of the justices said, yeah, the pregnancy resource centers can be compelled to utter speech in defense of abortion. I mean, it's ridiculous. It'd be like telling a gym, you have to tell people where the nearest McDonald's is. Like, why do they have to advertise the competitor? It doesn't make sense.
It's nuts, man. It's nuts. Well, look, the divergence between the proposition stood for by what you just said and what we're talking about with potential efficacy of court packing is represented by this case coming down the pike from my new home state, Mississippi. I'll read you the top 3 lines of this NPR article. In challenge to Roe, Supreme Court to review Mississippi abortion law. This was back in May, and the case has not yet held. With Roe versus Wade hanging by a thread, remember this is NPR, the U.S. Supreme Court has agreed to consider a major rollback of abortion rights. It is the second time in weeks that the court's new conservative majority has signaled a willingness to reconsider long-established legal doctrine, this time on abortion, just weeks ago on guns. Total misnomer here. I want to keep reading, but it's not reconsidering either abortion or guns in any of the recent holdings. The court said Monday it would review next term whether all state laws that ban pre-viability abortions are unconstitutional. I want to ask you about this in a second, Trent. The court's 1973 ruling in Roe versus Wade declared that a woman has a constitutional right to terminate a pregnancy, a little baby, in the first 6 weeks of her pregnancy when the fetus is incapable of surviving outside the womb. Now, let me get your take on 2 things, Trent. One, viability is enshrined in the, I know you've read it, the holding for Roe versus Wade. A baby's viability changes ostensibly with technology. So how can the moral law or the law against murder even in our positive laws, change. And two, there's a great big Trojan horse exception carved into the Roe holding, right? It's abortion for all 40 weeks, as long as there's a psychological need felt, basically at the whims of the mother. So this first trimester thing is really a misnomer, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I would say that to understand Roe and its holdings, we have to remember. So Roe in 1973 came up with the trimester system, which is itself was kind of illogical. It's like, well, what are we doing here? First 12 weeks, you can't ban abortion at all. Second 12 weeks, you can ban it to protect the woman's health from a dangerous procedure. Last 12 weeks, the third trimester, you can ban abortion, but you have to leave an exception for a woman's health. Now, Doe versus Bolton, a companion case to Roe, defines health as anything. I use the acronym PEPFA, PEPFA, physical, emotional, psychological, familial, or age related. So, like you said, you can drive. You could drive a truck through that exception. And so, what has happened is that the United States has joined the dubious honor of being one of like 7 countries in the world that essentially has elective abortion up until birth, like us, Canada, North Korea, China. Because even when you go to Europe, Western Europe, a lot of places there, abortion is illegal after 12 or 16 weeks. It's not like it is here. But so what happened though is in 1992, when the court had the Planned Parenthood of Southeastern Pennsylvania versus Casey, that was Governor Bob Casey, one of the few decent pro-life Democrats out there, was governor of Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania had passed like 5 laws on abortion, restricting it, and 4 of them were upheld. And so the court basically said the trimester system, we're throwing it out. Doesn't make sense. We're just going to pick viability as the line. And you're right. It's a bit illogical because viability doesn't tell us anything about the being that is being aborted that has the rights or no rights. Viability just tells us about the technology available to that human being.
Right.
Because that means, whether you're a person or not, it's going to change whether you're here you're at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center or a rural hospital in the US. Even there, it's going to dramatically change based on what equipment you have. So in Casey, court says, look, viability is the basic dividing line here. After viability, you can ban it, but you got to have the health exception, so it doesn't change. Prior to viability, you can restrict abortion. And then the key words were, you can't place an undue burden on the woman choosing the abortion. So that was the key rubric. So in Casey, they said you can have a woman wait 24 hours. She's got to get information on the procedure. You can say that children need their parents' consent. The only thing the court struck down was spousal consent. So Pennsylvania tried to say if a wife tries to have an abortion, husband has to consent. I mean, the whole logic is perverse to even talk about it, but they said, no, that is an undue burden, but the others weren't. But yeah, the viability thing, it really logically just doesn't make sense because we're saying, well, when the fetus is viable, now the state has an interest in it. Well, why? Why didn't it have an interest before? To say that the child could only survive in the womb doesn't mean that they're not a person. From that perspective, it'd be like if you were helping someone scuba diving, looking for buried treasure, and you do the thing where you wear the big helmet and the line is going from the boat, and you just snip the line, and you're like, well, he's not viable because he can't breathe underwater anyways. It's like, yeah, he is. You just destroyed the one thing that's keeping him alive.
Right.
So you're killing a person still. So yeah, I would say that's the legal issues and the moral issues involved in it. But it will be interesting for me if the Mississippi law goes to the court. I'm kind of a pessimist in general, so I'm not being terribly optimistic. I mean, I'll be frank with you with the court. I feel like the court a lot of times just hands down rulings that are reflective of society's values. So for me, if we can crack 70-80% of people want abortion, I think abortion's wrong, want it illegal in nearly all cases. Like we're close and we're getting there. We've held the line for a long time, but here's the reason. 1986, the Bowers decision upheld Georgia's anti-sodomy laws. 2003, Lawrence versus Texas overturns sodomy laws. What changed in 17 years? There's greater public acceptance of sodomy.
Right.
There's no legal thing that changed or understanding. So that's why where we're at on abortion now, this is the basic thing where people are at. About half the country thinks it's morally acceptable, half thinks it's morally unacceptable. Legally, about 25% want it legal in all circumstances, 25% illegal in all circumstances, about 50% in the middle. Well, they don't want abortion for birth control, but for rape, life of the mother, health, for the hard cases, I want it there. That's basically kind of where we're at, which means actually we are in a good place for laws that only a small minority want the regime that we have now.
The problem is the leftists like NPR who wrote this article say, look, it's the same fraction, a quarter on either polar fringe, that want it either totally legal or totally illegal. The status quo, as you well know, Trent, right now is that they have this weird trimester carve-out system, which provides an exception one could drive a truck through, as you say.
Right.
So I think it's compelling. I think the rhetoric that abounds right now with regard to abortion is compellingly leftist. And we need to reconfigure the anti-abortion movement. This is what I've been saying.
Well, that's the thing. You cannot in anything, and I know you talk about this in your book, language is key. You cannot give into the other side's distorted language. Now, sometimes we use our own language that's not helpful. So, for example, when I'm making my public arguments, I don't use the word baby because baby is an emotional term. Like, I mean, I'm still my mother's baby, and people think it's when they say it's not a baby, they mean the fetus doesn't look like the kid on the Gerber commercial. Well, no, a first trimester fetus won't. But I will say
neither
abortion,
do you, Trent.
right, right. But I would say that, look, abortion dismembers a human being. There,
Right.
it's like, look, these are objective facts. Human being is a scientific descriptive term that we can back up. Dismember is just, that's why we have to strip away the euphemisms. That's one that I like using even more than kill, is to say, well, how does it kill? And most of the time it's through dismemberment. And that's to say, look, I'm just describing what's happening. You can get mad at me. Don't get mad at me. It says we should be doing this,
Right. Don't shoot the messenger. Yeah, no, I like that because when you say baby, when one says baby, it adverts to this kind of almost cheerful, optimistic diction. It sounds wildly out of place. One gets that we are trying to reaffirm the absolute moral fact that this is a biological human, but baby sounds untoward or unfitting. I like what you're saying about insisting on the fact that it's a human being. Roll with me here. I've been anti-abortion since I learned that it was a thing. I'm a cradle to the grave conservative. I never lapsed in my far right conservatism. I'm afraid I lapsed a bit in my Catholicism, or really never converted fully until almost 30. But I remember I was watching, I think it's season 6, Seinfeld, and season 6 or 7. Kramer and Jerry and George begin talking about whether or not they ever slipped one past the goalie, meaning whether or not they ever got a woman pregnant. And I know that the show's largely about fornication and blah, blah, blah. It's still an entertaining show to watch. We have in our minds separated. I mean, you guys, even like you and me, because as you're adverting to here, politics is just downstream of culture. Everything is. Right. And the culture says, well, even among conservatives, abortion's a different thing from like fornication. They don't go together. But of course they do. This didn't set in until I listened to this joke. The whole episode was about whether or not one had slipped one past the goalie. And Jerry, who's kind of the voice of reason on the show, he's not wacky Kramer, he's not neurotic George. He says, that secret goes with me to the grave. And that was, for me, a lifelong firm opponent of abortion. No major change, but it was a cultural moment where I realized, and luckily I never fell into this trap. This is why it's beautiful to get married young and to stay chaste until you get married. But these guys that are living a life not unlike Jerry Seinfeld, the character, that's just living unmarried into his late 30s. They're going around and fornicating. And because of the non-carve out that you adverted to about 6 minutes ago, that if men are just fornicating freely, like bulls, they have no say over whether or not a woman that they impregnate kills their little human being, and they
Right.
don't. And according to the jokes of Seinfeld, they don't even care if they slipped one past the goalie. This means they literally got a woman pregnant and presumably killed the baby.
Yeah.
Isn't this something even we don't talk about much on the conservative Catholic right?
I think that for me, it was interesting actually. I was interviewed for a podcast. I think it was for Students for Life of America, actually. And they said to me, so what do we do? We talked about legal laws and legality. What do we do practically when it comes to abortion? And I said, practically speaking, we need to find these men and give them a kick in the pants and tell them to be dads and to do the right thing. And we have to pretend like we can't pretend like they're not. It's not just the woman and the child. We have to focus there. And what was funny, Tim, was that when it wrapped, the host said to me, "Wow, I've asked that of every guest who's come on, and you're the only person who has said that." Because everyone else is like, well, we should provide pregnancy resource centers and adoption and resources, and that stuff is fine. There's a place for all of that. But you're right. For what I'm concerned about is that politics downstream of culture, that if we, it's like the people who say, well, why aren't you promoting birth control if you want to reduce abortion? It's like Catholics, and there'll be other conservatives who are not pro-life who will tell you and tell us, well, look, just promote birth control if you're so against abortion. And what I say to them is, look, my goal is not to reduce abortion per se. I do want to reduce abortions. Absolutely. Every life saved is important. My goal is to restore the legal protection unborn children once had. My goal is for society to recognize them as having the same value as toddlers. And so I would ask you, not you, them, how does giving a guy a condom, how does does not help my goal of restoring legal protection for the unborn at all? If anything, it inhibits that. I'll give you an example. I was at a university in Colorado doing a pro-life talk, and a student comes up to me and he says, "Why aren't you handing out condoms at your talk if you're so against abortion?" And I just said, you know what? The campus health center gives away condoms for free. Why should I hand you out a condom? They give it away for free at your own school. And he said, why are you expecting me to walk all the way across campus for condoms? But I'm like, look, if that guy cannot walk 100 yards to get a free condom, what's he going to do if he impregnates somebody? So
Is the man trying to woo females?
Neck, beard, and all. Yeah, he was a charmer for sure, as you could expect someone like that.
How'd the conversation end? Were you just like, no, dude, I'm not going to give you prophylactics? Did you come up to me to engage my mind?
Well, I said,
hit me up like the candy man.
Yeah, exactly. But I redirected it back. I redirected and said, look, my goal is to make it illegal to dismember human beings before they're born. Do you think that's a good goal or not? And so what I do is I just shifted and I pivoted.
Right.
And that's important for us as pro-lifers. You don't want to get sucked into the side issues. So it's like when people say, well, how many children have you adopted? My answer is, look, let's assume I haven't adopted any kids. Let's assume I actually really don't like children. I'm kind of a curmudgeon.
Right.
How would me being a bad person justify keeping it legal to dismember human beings? And now you're back to the main point, and you've disarmed the attack.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're pro slavery abolition movement. How many, slaves did you personally free, a la John Brown? It's like,
well, that was the arguments. I remember old antebellum political cartoons that showed a black man in the North, and it's snowy, and there's signs that say "No blacks apply." And then in the South, and then his Southern counterpart is like fishing in a stream, and it's just all happy-go-lucky. It's like, you want to free these slaves, but you won't hire them. It's like, well, yes, the North's continued discrimination against African Americans was wrong, but that did not justify the enslavement that was practiced in the South. So even if, but here's the thing, when people say, oh, you only care about the child after they're born, I will say that's a load of bull. Prove it. Because when you say that, what you mean is you don't agree with my big government solutions to the problems children face after they're born, so you don't care about them. I'd say let's have a real conversation here. Don't tell me I don't care about children just because I disagree with your politics. If
Right.
anything, my solutions are actually better for these kids than just sticking them in a cycle of poverty that you've kept them in for decades, keeping them in crummy schools where they won't have opportunities. So don't give me that.
You know what I say to them when they do that? Sorry, we got a sound here.
See, wait, I don't hear
Yeah,
you.
you know what I say to them when they say that? I say, when they hit you with the you only care about them before birth, not after. I say, yeah. So, what I care about is a human being in its most fragile state. When that young human being can't defend itself, and I pray God on my knees that all parents, so one of my prayers daily, that all parents take loving support and care for their children. But because of subsidiarity, because of the nature that the catechism calls the family, the single cell of society, the original cell of society, the state doesn't really have the right to interfere with a family that's raising its kids the wrong way. And yes, I know most families do, and this generates bad habits. It's bad habit generative. And all you can do is pray for these young kids that are being raised in the darkness outside of the light that is the Roman Catholic Church, the single light. And yeah, it sucks that so many people are living lives like that. But what I definitely take upon myself, and someone like you, Trent, have taken upon yourself, is to crusade for these kids when they're in the womb. And we should get back to Roe. What it does is it didn't illegalize abortion, as you well know. What lots of people out there forget too often is that Roe made it federally illegal for states to make abortion illegal. They made it illegal to make it illegal. So that's really, really wrong. And the Lord can't smile on it. And so, yes, do I care about lives before birth, but not after? To cut through all the mumbo jumbo, yeah, basically, sure. And so what? I care about babies when they're
wait, are you just saying that as like hypothetical? I mean, I don't know why we can't just say, well, no, we just think all human beings before and after birth should have legal protection. I don't know why we have to say that. I mean, I could see in a hypothetical, but I just say, well, you're wrong. I care about them before and after. I just think it should be illegal to kill both.
Sure. And I actively I'm concerned about all human beings. I want them.
But you can have an emphasis.
Well, yeah. But the point of the spear actively in terms of what the anti-abortion movement concerns itself with is abortion.
Right.
And you can't in the country the way things stand, even though basically one of the political parties worships Moloch or something close to it. As of now, you can't kill babies after birth. Actually, that's not true because of the status of the Born Alive Act. But you can't kill a baby actively much after its birth.
Right.
And if they change that, then yeah, the status of my lobbying or your lobbying will change with the times. But for right now, the anti-abortion movement is concerned with abortion. Does this surprise you? That's what I tell them.
And people who try to say, why aren't you doing this and that? It's like, well, Matt, that'd be like if you went up to the Susan G. Komen booth at the fair on breast cancer.
Right.
And you said, why aren't you doing anything about lung cancer or prostate cancer? Where's the brown ribbon for prostate cancer?
Right.
It's like, well, we do this. It's just like everybody else. If there is a problem in society, you focus your resources, and abortion is the biggest one that we have. Why not focus on that?
Precisely. And speaking of which, it would be nice to get some prostate cancer support in the men's professional sports, right? They have a big deal in October for breast cancer, but we should get some prostate cancer support. But that's exactly right. It's like, wait a minute. This is really what I say to these people when they ask me that question, because we confront a lot of the same rhetorical devices. You're surprised that an anti-abortion advocate would train most of his fire on abortion? You don't think childhood obesity or too many cavities from consuming too many sweets are real problems? Well, they are. They're not really my problems that I've chosen to spend my time, the principle of
Right.
scarcity being what it is, combating. That's all. These people are absurd.
Well,
And
and
then
it's
now,
just it's a way to diffuse the pro-life movement. And that's why it's interesting. I know you've said before, like, you're not a fan of the term pro-life, and more so, I find it to be unhelpful when people take it to mean you're not really pro-life unless you do X, Y, or Z. I like anti-abortion. Another term I like that I was thinking when I was driving back home for this interview, I'd love to resurrect is that the pro-life movement back in the 80s was called the right to life movement. And I kind of like that because pro-life is like, well, why aren't you keeping, these, well, the people who will say, what aren't you doing about police violence against African Americans? Like, well, you're getting your statistics all wrong there. But even still, pro-life is not about trying to improve the welfare of every human being. Nobody could do that.
right,
But I like no movement could do that. But right
right,
to life, I like that it's focused. Like, look, the goal, even if people are suffering, you have poverty, you have things like that, it's not legal to kill these people. All right.
right,
Even with like
right.
immigration, it's illegal to kill someone just because they're an illegal immigrant in the country. You have a right to life. I'm saying is there are human beings who don't have a right to life. I want to fix that.
Precisely. Yeah. Don't you think? I mean, the critique that I've offered has some teeth insofar as I wanted to talk to you some naturally about the seamless garment fallacy that's been popularized. Don't you think that the pro-life movement is so overbroad? The diction, the terminology, the terminological neologism, right to life, is so overbroad that we're inviting to some extent the seamless garment fallacy, and that's kind of what you just said.
I don't know. Maybe what we have to do, because I still like the term pro-life. I still think it's helpful. It's positive. It has a positivity to it. Maybe what we need to do is just be very forthright about its limits. And also, what's
Yeah.
like the term pro-life, I feel like it's misused purposely by opponents of the pro-life movement in order to weaken it.
Right.
Because, for example, like the term pro-choice, and people like on the Daily Show, or no, it wasn't the Daily, or no, it wasn't Daily Show. I think it was Reason TV. They went to the Democratic National Convention and they asked them, how are you pro-choice? Absolutely. Like, okay, do you think parents should get vouchers to have a choice to send their kids to school? Well, no. Just want to be able to choose to have a handgun. Well, it's like, okay, you're not really pro-choice at all, but there's not a loud enough voice to tell pro-choice people they actually don't believe in all choices. It's just a nifty sounding label for them. Because if that whole you're not really pro-life thing, which is a hard thing to deal with, it's just wielded so much against us. That
Right.
same thing could be done to people who are pro-choice. It's just rarely done.
Right. We're according to our own druthers and our own self-billing, pro-choice, which I think is weak. They're we're pro-life. They're pro-choice. We're both being overbroad in ways that we think appeal to the electorate,
Right.
in some under some certain heading. Well, I would say our elective overbroadness to not narrow down, not to winnow, to finally tailor what the real issue is allowing them to do it too. They're like, well, if you're pro all life, then we're pro all choice. And of course, neither is accurate. What the issue is killing babies in the womb. And again,
and I would be fine with even pro-legal abortion and anti-legal abortion. Because I mean,
right.
well, the most blunt would be pro-abortion and anti-abortion. The problem is there's a lot of people who say, I'm not pro-abortion, I don't like it, I just think it should be legal, to which I then ask them, why don't you like it? And any reason you give will be a good reason to make it illegal.
That's fair. But I think you're letting them off the hook there a little bit. It's like, look, the old fallacy, they always hit you. They're giving themselves elbow room. They're like, well, here, my answer is really unique. It's not binary. I wouldn't have one myself, but I think it should be legal. It's like, well, the question, it's a legislative debate. So right. Whether or not, heroin ought to be legal, it's not a third non-binary point of view to say, well, I won't do heroin. But if we're debating whether or not heroin ought to be legal, whether or not you would do it yourself is immaterial, right? So I don't even think you need pro-legal abortion. I mean, we're winnowing down effectively now. So I would much rather have pro-legal abortion, anti-legal abortion, as the terms, and we're not going to get our way anyway. But I don't even think we have to throw legal in there, because it's a legislative debate. What should
and that's assumed,
positive
and I think it's fine just to say, look, like you're either pro or anti-slavery, you're pro or anti-abortion. Which
Right.
side are you on? You
Right.
either even if you don't like it, you want it to be legal, and then we need to say, all right, well, what is this thing? What is this act? What is abortion? What are the unborn? If they are individual members of the species and they have the same basic rights you and I have, then this obviously violates their rights. And so, yeah, we need to get people talking about it more, because the unborn are not visible. And also, though, what you said about fornication, that also makes it harder for us, because I truly believe if abortion had nothing to do with the sexual act, I think it would be illegal. I think it would be illegal if we had a different thing where to have children, an alternate reality, you just stuck your finger on a DNA reader and a baby grew in a container. And if you just went in and dismembered that child, people would be like, you're a monster. But
Agreed.
because it's connected to sex, well, that's the thing. When anything is connected to sex,
Right.
people throw reason out the door. So if a white person says they're black, they're racist or they're mentally unhinged. If a man says he's a woman, he's heroic, because it has something to do with sex, and it's with abortion. So if sex gets in there, in whatever the issue is, if sex is involved, rationality goes out the window.
Yeah, Mary said this at multiple apparitions. Like, it's mainly the sins of the flesh that is causing most people to fall into hell. I don't know what the sort of common cultural Catholic assumes a hellbound person's confession, or maybe they don't do confessions, conscience would, if assuaged, sound like something like, I killed 40 people this week and I, clubbed a bunch of baby harp seals. People aren't going around doing these sort of really ambitious crimes, right? What they're doing is they're filthy, vile sins of the flesh. And like you say, when sins of the flesh get involved, people bid adieu to their reason. It's
Oh yeah, but it's not just it's non-Catholics, but it's also Catholics. I mean, you have, with the sins of the flesh, it's like I was reading a book on clerical celibacy a while back, and it was talking about priests and seminarians who are having these academic debates about how if they happen to engage in sodomy with another priest, it doesn't violate their vow of celibacy. I mean, it's just torturous reasoning. It's like, look, get your head out of wherever. Look, what you're doing is wrong. But once again, when sex is involved, the rationality just goes out the window. You can't just see what is plainly and obviously wrong.
Yeah. Trent, I am sweating like LeBron James in any Game 7. So I wanted to talk to you about one other thing. It is a hot Mississippi day, and when we turn on, I'm in the upstairs, my little studio here. When we turn on the air conditioning, it gets way too loud. When we turn it off, I start sweating like LeBron in Game 7. So I wanted to ask you real quick what your take on this is.
Take on what?
Cardinal Burke.
I thought you were going to ask about LeBron and Space Jam. But all right.
He's gone, man. Round 1, he's gone. I used to be a Laker fan until they recruited LeBron James.
Remember the last podcast you did with Matt Frad? He had a similar situation. Like, he was super sweaty, and he said he was, what was the phrase? Sweating like a bush pig.
A bush pig. I was like, this must be an Australian thing.
So you are sweating like a bush pig.
Now I'm sweating like the bush pig, but I haven't even been to that continent. I'm guessing it's a real thing. No, I wanted to get your take on Cardinal Burke, who's taken a really strong stance. He's, the guy I listen to the most in the church. If I today, the living man that I listen to most in the church, the prelate. He said that absolutely Biden should be excommunicated. He insinuated that it should be a late sententiae excommunication over the abortion issue. The USCCB has agreed to sort of talk about it, and we should be finding out what they say within a few months. What are we to think of the USCCB on abortion when it should be completely clear? We're not talking about conservatives who aren't Catholic or libertarian conservatives who are weak on abortion or anything like that. We're talking about Catholic bishops who are
I got
not delivering the message on abortion.
I gotta be honest with you. I really do think it's not just bishops, but commentators, people I see online, but both sides. It's just easy to make excuses for the political party you prefer. It happens on both sides, conservative and liberal, and that's what's happening with abortion. So, on the question of the sanctions for Catholic politicians who support legal abortion, I don't know if you could get excommunication based on most. When I read commentaries on the Code of Canon Law, nearly all of them say that the code on abortion deals with procuring it. So it's not, that would be restricted to the immediate people who are involved. And people have to remember, excommunication is not like, well, this is just the penalty we give for the worst sins. Because, I mean, you could commit mass murder and not get excommunicated. You know, that's not an there's
Okay.
only, right. I mean, you'd if you didn't repent, you'd still go to hell. But excommunication is very specific. Usually the things that are related to excommunicable offenses are offenses to priests or the sacrament or things like that, where it's automatic. Canon lawyers in the commentaries on canon law, because it's interesting that abortion is like one of the only criminal statutes that, you know, if you call it criminal in the theological sense, that's in automatic, because, you know, it's not like rape or murder or things like that. You know, if you murder a born person, you're not automatically excommunicated. I think the reason that's in canon law is because the church had, especially in the 83 revision of the code, the church had saw that so many civil governments had abdicated their duty to protect the unborn in law, that at least the church will protect the unborn within its own laws, within its own canon law. So I don't think that you'd be able to apply it to excommunication to pro-abortion politicians. Now, Canon 915 on withholding communion for those who are in manifest sin, that is a lot easier drive. And for me, the question that I ask is, when I deal with people on the other side of the political aisle who are Catholic, who talk about this and say, you're weaponizing the Eucharist, you're doing all the blah, 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 blah. Well, first, by the way, I mean, these same people who say you're weaponizing the Eucharist, don't you tell this Biden, Pelosi. I'm sorry, if Trump became Catholic but didn't change any of his attitudes or moral stances, they would be apoplectic at him receiving communion. I mean, you just no, they would say, oh, this is sacrilegious. Da, 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 da. So I would ask them, under what circumstances would a vote disqualify a politician from receiving the Eucharist and show he is persisting in manifest grave sin? Give me a hypothetical example. That's what I do to the other side. Say, look, give me an example. Like, should we have withheld communion from Catholic politicians that endorsed racial segregation or slavery or other evils like this? So the other side, though, Tim, what's interesting is they always tap dance around that question, because they know if they were to say, well, yeah, of course they should have withheld communion from segregationist Catholic politicians. Well, then logically, if abortion is worse than that, so then they won't commit. I've done this online a bunch till my, you know, it's just infuriating. They'll say, oh, it's a different context, a different this, different that. You don't want to say it because logically it entails what we should do today. So no, I would say, to answer your question, in general, I would say we should take a firm stand that if someone is, especially if they're Catholic and they have the revelation of our faith, they should know they should be protecting unborn children. At the very least, what will be interesting will be this is, and I would ask these people and others, let's draw a line in the sand. All right, let's draw a line in the sand. If Biden overturns the Hyde Amendment, for example, it's not like he's failing to pass a pro-life law or something like that, or it's not like he's compromising and doing a bill and part of the bill is funding Planned Parenthood, because, you know, people say, oh, well, there's this and that. Here's a specific thing that is promoting abortion. Should he, you know, be given communion or not if he goes and does that? Or someone like Cuomo, Governor Cuomo in New York, who passes, if you are a Catholic politician and you pass a Roe v. Wade protection law in your state law, so that if Roe is overturned, abortion is still legal in your state, why in the world should you receive our Lord on the tongue that spoke these things to condemn children? I don't get it.
He already overturned the Mexico City policy. I mean, I like the line in the sand approach you're taking, but if it is the preeminent moral issue of our day, then I say let the guilty hang. I don't care if it weaponizes the Eucharist. I mean, that's just descriptive language, prescriptive language, more than descriptive language.
And
anyway.
also, it's for
But
the
let the
benefit.
guilty
We
hang.
have to think of their souls. We should
Right.
also be concerned about the souls of those people who will be held accountable to say, well, I didn't like abortion, but I'm, a politician. I can't pose my views. Did you know this killed babies? Well, yeah, but I don't like it. And yet you still voted for babies to be killed. What is that? What is that going to do to a person's soul? That's the thing. Excommunication, withholding the Eucharist. It's not like we're great and you're bad. It's the church, just as like Jesus is the divine physician here to heal us. And sometimes the doctor's got to give you some pretty blunt news so you can be healed. Now, I
Right.
will say, though, it isn't there. I will leave room that there are some cases where a Catholic dissident politician will take a church condemnation as like a badge of honor for his constituents. So we don't want to feed into that either. So you have to be smart. Matthew 10:16, clever as snakes, gentle as doves, clever as serpents. But I will say with those individuals, like the church should say, well, I'm not going to do a photo op with you. I'm not going to do all this nicey-niceys when you won't protect the unborn. It'd be the same if there were a Catholic conservative politician who was saying we should shoot people the second they come over the border. It was interesting, Tim. I was asked about this at a talk in El Paso. So, border town in Texas. And they said, well, what do you do when you've got pro-life politicians who are anti-immigration? And I'll say, look, immigration, we can disagree about how to handle that. But like if there was a conservative politician who said we should shoot people, men, women, and children, the second they come over the border, I'd say he's wrong and he should be denied communion. That's a terrible thing. Much the same way a politician who says, so if an immigrant trying to get into our country is killed on sight, no, we shouldn't do that. A baby trying to leave the womb to enter our world to be killed on sight, that's just as wrong also.
Well, more wrong because the
They're
borders are sovereign, and it's probably an overreaction. We can all agree, but except it's much more wrong.
Right, sure.
To kill. When a criminal puts a gun to your head and says your money or your life, he's making you choose between two things you have the right to, which is one of the reasons that's wrong. But yes, of course, this would be an overreaction and an unjust one, an unjust defense of the borders to kill on sight. We should just deport on sight.
Right. And so, but right there, and much the same, we would agree also, we wouldn't like our deportation wouldn't be like, well, we're going to take them on a boat and make them jump off into the ocean. It's like, well, we're just getting them out of the country. Like, no, you're murdering people. And it's the same when people say, well, I'm just terminating a pregnancy.
Right.
Yeah, but what happens to the baby when you do that?
Right. Yeah. And to the people that you say to you, and many of them say this to me, oh, if you take away a communion from these politicians, what are you saying? You're great, they're bad? It's like, no, I'm saying they legislatively enable the slaughter of little humans, and I don't. That's all.
Right, and that's a problem. But that's a problem on the left. Father Martin does this all the time. In fact, I did a 1-hour video on my podcast on his tactics if people want to go really in depth on that. But he'll try to say, oh, if you withhold communion from these Catholic politicians, don't you have to withhold it from everyone who is racist or unloving or doesn't care for the poor, quote unquote. Yeah. And if this idea that, but if you make every sin essentially equal in gravity,
right?
The problem is we all commit small sins every day, James 3:2. If all sins are equal in gravity and we commit many small sins, then the big sins don't matter anymore. That we have to show, look, there's clearly a difference here, and people can look at their conscience. I'm not a hypocrite for saying a politician who votes for legal abortion should be denied communion. If I voted for abortion, then I would be a hypocrite. If I voted for a law for it and I wanted to be treated differently, that would be hypocritical, but I'm not doing that.
Right. Trent, a couple things in closing. One, we should do a tag team 2-on-2 Voltron Lions join forces debate against a couple of pro-abortionists at some point this summer or in this fall, because that would be fun. And number two, everyone go listen to Council of Trent podcast. He's now commuting remotely, and you should I know you probably couldn't, but you have a little more than a snowball's chance of hell in hell in getting Martin on your show, because that would be great.
You know what's
listening.
funny is before I did that episode, and I wanted to cross all my T's and dot all my I's because I know that Father Martin has powerful friends, So I did a 1-hour episode called The Slippery Tactics of Father James Martin. And I reached out to him on Twitter and said, look, and I wasn't expecting a reply. I said, look, I'm going to do this episode on you, but I would prefer I could send it to you privately and we could have a conversation instead. Because, if you're going to critique someone, go to your brother first.
Right.
And because I didn't want someone to say, you didn't even reach out to Father Martin. Blah, blah, like, well, I did,
right.
but he never puts himself in a situation to have hard questions asked.
Right.
But it's a tiny more of a snowball's chance. It's not one that I would ever think would happen, but it's one you see that reasoning, especially on Catholic Twitter and things like that. The arguments he uses, we have to be appraised of that.
Right. Right. Well, it would be great watching it. He'd never go on my show. What's that? Yeah. So I wanted to just give the parish orphans and retrogrades out there a couple reminders. One, do like Trent did, or like I did, get from the reddest of the red. We both come from California get from the bluest of the blue to the reddest of the red. We come from California. Trent's now in Texas, and I've disappeared here. I've gone off the grid altogether. I'm in Mississippi, of course, and you can do so by contacting realestateforlife.org. They will help you to get out of your situation, and they're good, pro-life. Most of them are Catholic. They do so for very, very, very easy and cheap. So do like Trent did, do like I did. We're both in the first year of our new homes. Mine's about to conclude here, and Trent's a couple months behind. Also, starting in fall, what I urge all of you to do is homeschool your kids. And we have provided here at Rules for Retrogrades the resources needed for doing so. Go to timothyjgordon.com. And if you click enroll, we are now offering a whole host of courses for not only adults like Aristotle or church history, but also for homeschoolers like Latin 1, Algebra, the really, really important courses that a lot of homeschoolers are intimidated to teach their own kids. We'll handle that for you. So go to timothyjgordon.com. Sorry, it's not enroll anymore. Now it's just its own tab, the Retrograde Classical Academy. And listen to Trent's podcast, Council of Trent. And I'd like to do a 2 versus 2 debate with you sometime, Trent, if you're
there is it would be fun. There's a few people out there I'd want to engage. I really want to engage the people at Catholics for Choice, because I mean it's such nonsense stuff. It would be it'd be a surreal and fun kind of debate to do. But yeah, we can. The problem is, Tim, I'll be honest with you. The problem is most people, the professionals who defend legal abortion, they don't do debates because they know they'll lose.
Right.
That's the problem.
No, I know. They're not going to take us on. Or we're throwing down the gauntlet. So if they want to, or really anything else, because you're a very, very engaging debater. I like your tactics a lot. You employ a lot of the tactics I actually mentioned in Rules for Retrogrades. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think it would be a formidable, fun thing. Anyway, I really appreciate you coming on the show, Trent. Do you have any plugs you want to get in? Everyone listen to Trent's podcast.
Yeah, I would just recommend Council of Trent. I do 5 15-minute episodes a week. I also do a rebuttal video every week where I take an anti-Catholic video on YouTube and I break it down. So that's all at Council of Trent on YouTube. I've also got some homeschool classes. Yeah, homeschooling your kids. We homeschool our oldest, and it's been amazing. I will. I'm not going to send my kids to government school. That is an absolute last resort, and most Catholic schools, frankly. Right. So we do that, and I teach some online classes at Homeschool Connections. So I do a class that covers 3 classes that cover the whole New Testament, and 3 classes that cover the whole Catechism. That's at homeschoolconnections.com. Just search my name there. And then just check out Council of Trent. We're having a lot of fun with that, and it was a lot of fun. Hope to be on the show again sometime.
Cool. Yeah, everyone out there, stay faithful, stay true, keep your head on a swivel. Don't sweat through your shirt if you can help it. And like a bush pig, as Matt Fred said, listen to Trent, listen to me.